Excuse the wet hair and the fact that I'm dressed like a wizard. I just got out of the shower and I am a wizard. So let's get back to day 3 of pretending we're a lot richer than we are in the guise of poker strategy. 200, 400, 800, we get a limp from Mickey in the cutoff. He could be limping any kind of trash. I'd like to say he's probably a lot more likable in person than he sometimes comes across on TV. I get the feeling he's a good guy, which doesn't matter when it comes to poker strategy. I just want to throw that out there. We get a raise from JR from 800 to 3,000 on the button, who might actually be the best player on the table, which shows you that everything is relative. We are a drunken JRB in this hand, so apart from asking ourselves, is it still a drinking problem if it means we're getting invited back to all of these games? We have to remember that we're going to have JRB's image, his drunk image, not your nitty image at home. We're in the small blinds with 7-6 suited. Are we calling? Are we 3-betting? Of course we're fucking calling. If you said anything else, you probably don't understand. 7-6 suited plays great multi-way and we want to get people like Mickey in the pot. So when we do hit a hand, it's going to be something like a straight or a flush or a really disguised trips or 2-pair. And then we want to have as many people in the pot as possible. We now see a 3-bet out of the big blind by Mr. NE2, Alan Keating himself. He does come across as extraordinarily likable himself. Closing the action, we're always going to be calling this deep 7-6 suited. Let's see a flop. We see a half pot c-bet from Alan Keating. We do not know if he's going to be doing this with 100% of his range. We don't even know if he might just go bigger if he has aces. What do we do? What do we do and why? That is right. When you're playing a guy that never folds, try not to bluff too much. If you can find a small way of winning a pot, then go for it. Perhaps if he has ace king, we call flop, he gives up turn, goes check check, and we bet the river. Perhaps we hit our hand and perhaps we end up stacking aces. We want to keep the SPR, Google it if you don't know what it means, pretty big for when we do hit our hand. We're calling. So the turn's an ace. God damn it. We see Keating now continuation bets again after we check to him for another half pot bet. Let's do some quick maths. We're getting 3-1. We need 25% equity to be able to call. So direct odds, we do not have it. We probably have about 18% with our hand, plus maybe our hearts aren't live. Who knows? But implied odds. Oh my God. Google it if you don't know it again. I think if we hit our hand and Keating has something like top pair or better, we can get a good juicy maybe 100, 200, 300k out of him on the river. So I'm saying hit the call button. What do you think? JRB agrees with me. He decides to see a river, which is the beautiful offsuit 3. God damn it. Hallelujah. We believe in Jesus Christ himself. What are we going to do? What are we going to do and why? This is a very interesting decision. So probably pause the video at this point and have a little think about it. Yeah, so the issue is if Alan does have something like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, ace 9, things like this, it's actually pretty damn hard for us to get too much more money by checking to him. And there's one very crucial reason for that. What is it? There's 4 to a fucking straight. Even NE2 Keating sees this 4 to a straight. In fact, he probably sees it more than other people because he's used to getting straights with his fucking deuce 9 or whatever it is. So we have to be leading into him in this kind of situation. We can't let him check behind because I don't think when the flush draw misses, he's gonna think that we have a value hand when we lead here. It just doesn't, and nothing obvious gets there apart from specifically 6-7. So I think we can get a juicy amount. What do you think? And the only thing you should be asking yourself here when choosing a bet size, don't fucking think about frequencies, blockers, GTO, get the fuck out of my channel. Get the hell out! The only thing you want to be thinking about is what is the maximum that Alan will call with an ace. That's it. Maybe you ought to be thinking about if he somehow has 2 pair or a set or something like that as well. Seems unlikely given his sizing on the flop and turn, but pretty much the thing we're trying to get value from is an ace. You want to be thinking, or maybe pocket kings if you decide to bet that on the turn, what is the most they will call? I'm thinking probably around 250k. I think that's around my level. I've seen Alan play a few times. Maybe you have your own idea, but I'd say something along the lines of just like 1.2x pot. It's a little cheeky overbet, a little small overbet. And I think that would be very nice for us because it looks like we're repping the deuce straight, which is pretty hard to have. So I think we might just get hero called off. And it's worth noting that if 250k works half as often as 100k, it's still better. Do the maths, Google it, I promise. So let's see what JRB, the man who gets invited to all of these games, probably has great reads on his opponents, does. He checked. And now let's just
gonna check it back.
I got the nuts.
Yep. another 100,000 over there for JRB.
He could have squeezed a little more out of that man there, but he was giving him some rope.
Today we are Andy. We see a raise from +2 from Stanley, who makes about as much money in an hour as you will on these 12 reincarnations that you'll have on this earth. And we see a flat from Espen, who, if you ask him nice enough, apparently will consider giving you 3% of his main event. And we are in the big blind. Bear in mind there's a straddle, so we're not finishing the action with pocket deuces. What do we do? What are we doing? Why? Obviously we call. We're not even going to consider it. Now we see a squeeze. It's worth noting that this 3-bet is pretty small. 6,000 from 1,200 would be a normal size raise out of position if there were no callers behind, but with 2 callers, this is a little bit small, probably indicating that this player is a recreational player or perhaps has some kind of discrepancies in his sizing. So we get 2 folds and we are in the big blind now with pocket deuces. Are we going to call or are we going to fold? Obviously, this hand wouldn't be a hand if we were just going to fold it, although I might try and balance it in the future just to keep you on your toes. But a good rule of thumb is if your stack, or the effective stack, if you have as much behind as 10 times the amount that you're calling, you can just about justify set mining. Now, this is obviously one of those wives' tales rules that just like has trickled down over thousands of years and isn't actually accurate according to modern scientific principles. But if you're completely unsure of the spot, it's worth taking into account, just so you know it's like the rough borderline.
And he's got one.
He has got one indeed. And it's on us now. Now, I would say, as a general principle, when playing against recreational players, especially, but also against professional players, you want to be considering leading. Is anyone going to be leading in the spot? Tell me now in the comments in your mind. Telepathically send it to me. And if we're going to be checking, are we going to be check calling? Are we going to be check raising? These are the kind of plans that we need to be making before we check. So we see Andy, us, leading almost pot-sized bet into the opponent. I guarantee 99% of you out there haven't ever made this play, at least not cognizantly. So this is already taking us into the weeds of how we would normally play, but god damn it, it's good to explore things we've never done before. So what is the purpose behind this? I would say there's one of 2 options. If Andy's in the comments watching this at some point, you can answer it for me. I would say either he's thinking, what is the maximum that Fang will call with ace, queen, ace, jack, ace, king? Or he's thinking, what is the size that I want to go with my bluffs? And so I'll probably balance that with my value hands. Now, Andy, if you're thinking the second one, that's a fucking huge punt. So I've got to assume you're thinking the first one, but you never know these days. Turn is a 9. We're in Andy's shoes. We've got a very aggressive image. Now we need to do one thing first. When you play in poker, you ask yourself, what is my opponent's range and what am I going to do about it? This is the thought process. You'll notice that often I won't say that specific plays are punts, but actually a thought process that gets to a play is the punt or is the great genius play. Now on the flop, I think leading into the opponent, if we think he's going to be checking behind ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack, but might actually be calling a bet, I think that is a genius spot to be leading. We're still going to be getting loads of value off his overpairs, etc., blah, blah, blah. So the turn is a 9. What is our opponent's range? We need to be thinking about it. There's some 10x, there's some 9x, there's some aces, kings, queens, jacks, potentially sets, but we're not going to care about those because it doesn't matter. We're just going to get stacked by them. Now there's also going to be some flush draws. There's going to be some ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack. Specifically, maybe with a spade, maybe without, maybe just ace king off is going to float the flop. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do and why? Now personally, I prefer a bet here. I prefer going a size that perhaps aces, kings, queens, and jacks might raise, and ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack might decide to call. If that is a size that's possible, I would say it's somewhere around 15% of the pot. Now this means that we don't get any folds from our opponent's hand. I don't think he's going to be folding even ace, jack, even if he's floated something like ace, 8 offsuit with the ace of spades. I feel like he's still going to be calling us. I really like going small here, but another option could be, if you want to just maximize value against overpairs, is probably just bet turn and shove river. Most rivers are just gonna be blanks, and you know, it's something that isn't a spade, something that maybe isn't a jack, and we're probably gonna be able to get all of the money, all of the mahunas out of our opponent. So guys, tell me what you would have done. Andy decides to check here, and I'm not a big fan of this, as much as I think Andy is a phenomenal poker player, better than 99.99% of poker players that have ever existed.
Damn.
I do think that he's made a bit of a punt here. I think that we're losing value against pretty much all parts of his range. Now, the opponent might decide to bet aces, kings, queens, and jacks, but he might not. He might not. Now he's seen us lead into him. He might decide for pot control or deception. Generally, when you're playing recreational players and you have an aggressive image, you want to be putting as much money in the middle as possible. And this, I think, is just offering too much of an opportunity for something like aces, specifically aces, maybe jacks as well, to check behind. And then also we're going to be losing money from ace king, ace queen, ace jack. So I don't like it. Let me know what you guys think. And if you're in the comments, let me know why you did it. Please tell me, justify the punt. Just kidding, brother, I love you. So it goes check, check, river's king, it's on us. And the first thing we obviously have to do is say, what is our opponent's range? Now, it's pretty much the same that we said on the flop because, you know, a lot of his hands could have checked back on the turn. They might not, they might have, they might not have. I'd say we can probably take out the boats specifically out of our range. So I'd say apart from pocket kings, we're just going to be ahead of this guy. We could also take out some 9x as well. So that leaves some flush draws, some ace high, some ace king, some king, queen, king, jack, potentially, and then some aces and queens and jacks that we beat as well. Now, the next thing to be asking is, what are we going to do about it? Pause the video, let me know. Of course, we're going to bet. Of course, we're going to bet. I don't know if we're going to get enough bluffs out of his ace highs to justify anything but betting. I think we have to get some hero calls out of something like pocket queens, pocket jacks. There is an argument for checking because now he might value bet his ace kings and his pocket aces and we get to check jam. Definitely a possibility, but I think there's just too large a possibility that he has 10x, jacks, queens, or something like king, jack that might actually just decide to check back itself. So I think we have to go for some value here. So the next question is, what size are we going to go? And if your thought process is anything but, what's the biggest amount that he will call with these hands, then you're punting. If you're thinking about blockers, if you're thinking about unblockers, if you're thinking about frequencies or fucking nonsense like that, get the fuck out of my channel.
Bruh, chill.
Just think, in reality, he has a range of hands. What is the most he will call with these hands? That is the reality of the situation. Your guess is going to be as good as mine. Well, probably not.
Okay.
But it's going to be as good as other people's in the chat, and mine isn't going to be perfect. So there's no correct answer here. If anybody tells you they have a correct answer, they're speaking out of their ass. There's just diarrhea just spurting out of there.
Hell no, man. What the
My guess would be something like 1.3x pot. Let's see what Andy does. Andy decides to go for about the 98% pot bet. I think I love it. I think I could see a very, very good argument for that. Andy, of course, going for the bet line. Often against recreational players, you want to be using that as a value bet. Often when you check the turn, they think you've given up and they think your line doesn't make enough sense when you're betting the river. So very well executed by Andy. Could he have got more value? You let me know, or at least let your friends know, because that is a discussion that is there to be had.
Those are the hands he loses to. He can beat the draws, but again, having two jacks in your hands makes it a little bit less likely your opponent had a big draw. Really interesting spot. I don't know if Fang can get away from this one. He's going to make the call. And again, Andy flops a set and gets paid.
Say to yourself in, boys and girls, you have a muscular physique, a lovable personality, and you've got ace jack in the cutoff. We're bumping it up to 1200. Andy himself is sitting in the big blind, stares us down and thinks we ain't made of shit. 3-bets us like it's 2006 to just above 3x, curious sizing to 4,000. What are we doing? What are we doing? And why? Sorry to interrupt your high stakes day wet dreaming, but this is your reminder. You have 3 more days to get 35% off any of my poker content. CharlieCarrel.com using the code FUCKGTO, all capitals, no space. Worth noting, we're actually playing over 1,000 big blinds deep. This really does change dynamics a lot. Here's the thing. If Andy's 3-betting linearly, meaning he's got all his 5-6 suiteds, 10-8 suiteds, king-queen offs, king-10 suiteds, a linear range, we can actually get away with 4-betting this for value, which is crazy to think about, but he's going to be incentivized to call with all of those kind of suited low hands, suited middle hands, and we're going to have him dominated. However, being 1,000 big blinds deep in position, ace-jack's just going to play so well as a call. Either one is completely fine. I would actually probably balance. I fucking hate hearing myself say that. Do actually have a decision here. Obviously the standard players to call, but I wouldn't mind seeing a raise being thrown in there every now and again. I think it really does depend on our perception of Andy's 3-betting range. If we think that he's 3-betting super linear, and if we think he's c-betting almost 100%, there's actually a ton of value to be got with ace jack, which is one of the best hands we can turn up with here, and it looks like we can be having a ton of bluffs in position so deep. So I actually wouldn't mind a raise to around 13,000. Take control of the pot, bet the turn, check behind most rivers and play it like that. However, calling is definitely the most standard play. Not too much to be said here. And DC bets 4k, we're always calling onto the turn. Turn is an offsuit 6, essentially a blank, perhaps not quite a blank, giving a few of Andy's potential 3-bet bluff candidates a little bit more equity to barrel. And now we see 12,000 into 16,000. Now, the larger that Andy bets here on this turn, the more polarized he is. Meaning, if he bet all of his chips, he's essentially saying in a really dumb way he's got a set. If he only bet a tiny amount of chips, he could be value betting something as bad as Queen 10. So when he bets 12,000, I'd say the worst value hand he's going to turn up with here is probably around ace 10. Meaning if we beat all of his bluffs and we even beat one of his value hands, we definitely cannot fold. However, it's worth noting that now Andy will not be value betting a queen, and he won't be value betting pocket kings for the sizing. He probably won't be value betting something as weak as ace 5 or ace 9. So really condensing down Andy's range to a ton of bluffs and a bit of value that we beat and a lot of value that we lose to, like aces, queens, ace queen, ace king, things like that. Let's fucking go, boys, with rivered aces up. Fuck you, Andy. God damn it, he's bet pod. We have a bluff catcher. Okay. Let's slow it down. I know this is meant to be high intensity poker content. It's just meant to be a dopamine rush, but just for a second, let's try and think. Let's breathe. There are lots of factors to take into consideration here. Pause the video, work out what you would do and why. If we're gonna be watching poker content, we might as well do it mindfully and critically and analytically. Okay, first things first, as I always teach you, what's the first thing we ask ourselves? What is our opponent's range? This is going to be very dependent on what we think that our range is. This is where the layers of poker can get complex when you're playing against very thoughtful, mindful, competent players like Andy. Now, when he's bet pot-sized into us on the river, he's essentially polarizing his hand and he's saying he has ace queen plus. Now, this really does make our ace jack a bluff catcher, and why is that? Why is he only betting this size with ace queen plus? It's because he knows that we can have a bunch of value hands ourselves. We can have a bunch of nutted hands. We can have ace queen, ace jack, ace 9, queen jack, pocket 9s. We can have 10-8 of diamonds, king 10 of diamonds. There's a ton of nutted hands that we can have. So when he's betting pot into us, he's saying that he's got a pretty fucking good hand, that he's not worried about all of these great hands that we might have. He's trying to get value, or he's bluffing. So either he's trying to get value out of a 1-pair or 2-pair hand, or he's bluffing and trying to get us to fold a 1-pair or potentially weak 2-pair hand. Now, that means that he's going to be polarizing. His bluffs are going to be very weak. His value bets are going to be better than ace jack. So now let's try and work it out. What bluffs can he have? Looking at it, the obvious one to me is 7-8. He could potentially have 4 combinations of 7-8 suited if he 3-bets them all pre-flop, which actually is a bit dicey. So maybe let's call that 2 combinations for the sake of argument. Other obvious bluff candidates is something like king jack, jack 10, so you know, something like jack 10 of spades. Having a jack in our hand actually is pretty relevant. I know I'm not talking about blockers too often, but when you're crunching down the numbers of a specific river situation, when you're working out the combos, bluffs and value and see if you got the pot odds, blockers are actually a factor. They're not the biggest factor. Let's not start fetishizing them, but they're a factor. The other type of bluffs that you can turn up with is something like missed diamonds, 4-5 of diamonds. We have to ask ourselves, if Andy were bluffing, would he go full pot with all of those hands? And it seems pretty unlikely when we have so many good hands. We have all of our ace queen combos as Garrett. We have all of our ace jack. We have all of our queen jack. There's so many great hands that we can turn up with it. Would he want to bluff pot? I really don't know. From my vast experience of calling rivers and being wrong, I know that when we have a strong range and people know that, they really tend not to bluff big into us. So my instinct is already saying this is a really dicey situation. However, let's now go through the value hands that Andy can potentially have. Aces, 1 combination. Queens, 3 combinations. nines, 3 combinations, ace queen, 6 combinations, and then 10-8 suited, king 10 suited, potentially another 8 combinations there depending how often he 3-bets them. This is already starting to look like a goddamn lot of combinations of value hands, and they could all potentially play it this way 100% of the time. Now, I'm not going to crunch the numbers here. You genuinely could do this with a pen and paper at home if you want to just write down bluffs and value and see if we're getting the right odds. We need to only be right here 33% of the time to make this call, which makes this all the more tempting. So it's up to you. Are we calling or are we folding? Yeah, most of us are calling. There's no two ways about it. If my gut tells me that it's a fold, if the maths tells me it's a fold, and I'm just staring down Andy and I've just rivered 2 pair, it's like, it's so hard to pull that trigger. Garrett is human after all. He makes the call. Andy shows him the bad news, which I feel like Garrett already knew, judging by facial expression and what Garrett was saying whilst he was tanking. You fight to live another day, G-Man, and all your mini G-Man wannabes out there. I love you. Peace. Oh, by the way, I'm selling action on Stake Kings. I've made a lot of people a ton of money on Stake Kings in the past. I've got a fucking amazing record. I'm giving people some sweats. In fact, I'm even letting people buy a little bit of my main event, which I definitely wouldn't usually sell for, but I love giving people the sweats. So if you want to invest your money in yours truly to see if I can beat the EPT High Rollers and main event, link is in the description below. See you.